Thanks everyone for coming. Welcome to the November 13th meeting of the Issaquah Environmental Board. I'm Don McWilliams, so I'll be your chair tonight. Due to the hybrid nature of the meeting, we'll have some members attending in person, others by computer at the phone. For all meeting attendees in remotely, please state your name each time before speaking. If joining remotely, please mute your microphone when you're not speaking. And commissioners in the room, if you desire to speak, please flip your tag up as we've been doing. We will summarize agreement around recommendations at the end of each topic as necessary. First, we're going to start by taking a roll call of the commissioners in attendance. Stacey, can you run us through a roll call?
Tom Anderson.
Here.
Nancy Davidson.
Here.
Jamie Finch.
Here.
Raj Gopandi.
Here.
Kiran Pan.
Here.
Mina June.
Here.
Don McWilliams. Dixie Bear.
Here.
Alex Lee Tigner.
Here.
Ann Newcomb.
Here.
Keith Gonzalez has an excused absence. And John Smith. Okay, we have quorum.
All right. I see Connie up there, and if I heard that conversation correctly, Connie wants to comment after the board report and self-analysis.
Possibly, she said she'll raise her hand if she has questions, and we'll look to the chair whether to recognize.
Okay. Connie will be watching for your hand if you have questions on that. With that, I think we can get going. So the first is approval of minutes. Is there anybody that wants to see changes to the previous minutes? Hearing that, it's all approved.
Okay.
And then with the mayor joining us tonight, thank you, Mayor. Thanks for taking the time. Did you want to start off with your agenda, Stacey, or do you want to give the mayor some time?
Yeah, why don't we start off with Mayor Polly? I think we had talked at our last meeting about having some engagement with council. I was advised to start with Mayor Polly, so the board could have a brief conversation, ask any questions you have, receive any feedback or guidance from the mayor. It looks like we'll have some more time in December in order to ask questions and have a little bit more preparation. But if we have any questions the board would like to ask tonight, since we have this opportunity, that would be great. Mayor Polly, I'm not sure if there's anything you wanted to start off by saying to the environmental board.
Sure, Jessica. I mean, it's been a bad news, good news 2 weeks. On the bad news side, at the federal level, we're probably not going to be able to expect great things in the next few years in terms of support for the kinds of work that the community and this board wants to do. Good news side, 2 items. Yay, Climate Commitment Act, which is one of our big funders, made it through, but also sent a really strong message that there's huge support for this, probably more than what some people realize in terms of it's good legislation, it's going to get the good outcomes. And for a city like Issaquah, where we have a staff team that has worked so hard to work with the Department of Commerce in every single granting opportunity they could, this is really good news for us. And I guess the last bit of good news is that we just had a council conversation last night in what is probably one of our most difficult budget experiences for this community and the council that's sitting right now since 2010, which was really the last time that the city had to make some extremely hard decisions about staffing and funding. Big kudos to Stacey and David for their suggestions on how their particular group would move through this, but most of our city departments ended up taking a 12% haircut, except for public safety. And that was super painful. So we lost a lot of positions, and there were capable staff in those positions in this budget. Not so with our sustainability group, but to say that with some creative thinking, we are staying relatively staffed the same. And with the Climate Commitment Act staying in place, many of our opportunities for funding are in place. And so that's the second little bit of good news. But very interested in hearing about the self-assessment. There are no questions tonight. I did add some time, I think a half an hour on the December 9th meeting as well. So whatever your preference is.
Question for the mayor? I'll give you a thought to think about, Mayor. As you think about it for the next month, maybe you come. I've always been curious what the council is thinking for the board's agenda moving forward into the next year. And I think we'd love to have your guys' input on what's important to council as we put together our work plan.
Yeah, and I think that's a great question. I'll work with Stacy on kind of looking at the budget and the work plan that is drafted so far coming out of that. I mean, we really don't know until council approves the final budget whether or not there's a little bit more horse trading or a little, request to shift things around or cut from here or there. But I'll think about it. I'll work on some points with Stacy. I think we're very fortunate in our community that we have a fairly unified council in terms of the work that you are doing. They like trying things. They like to pilot. They like to experiment. They like to lead where they can lead, but also to pay attention to what's going on in other larger jurisdictions where we may be able to steal something after somebody else has gone through the pilot. So I think we're in a pretty good situation politically, but it's nice that some of the boards that have been set up in the last few years have a way of reporting back out to the council. And I think one of the things we need to work on is to help some of our other boards and commissions to be able to do the kind of reporting back that you're doing. But yes, definitely we'll think about it and come back with some thoughts and comments next time. Thank you for that.
Nancy?
Hi, Mayor. One of the questions I have for you is the relationship between the city and the school district, since they're such a big player in terms of transportation, parking, and education of our kids, particularly in light of the failure of the bond issue. Well, apparent failure of the bond issue was pretty much like it's going down. So I guess the question I have for you is, what is the relationship between the elected officials of the city and the school district's elected officials to move forward environmental and climate change initiatives?
Ever since our new superintendent came on, that's been a good thing. It's been a good change. She has spent the last 2 years pretty much focused on the bond. And so as you can imagine, it not passing has really sent a swirl back through her and her administration and through the school board as well. We did get to have a meeting 3 or 4 months ago at the school district, one of the first in I think 4 years, to try and find some common work that we can do again. I know that there is excitement within the student body to see more connections and more proactive work together, but not a lot of traction yet in the administration. There's another event being planned for January or February, and I'm not sure what the agenda might be for that, but there are huge gains that can be made by getting the school board and the administration excited about climate action, resiliency, energy efficiency. They have some of the biggest infrastructure in town, some of the biggest buildings. They're also required to follow the state law in terms of building efficiency, which was a part of the bond. Actually, the part of the bond that I probably supported the most was based on the possibility that they were going to be able to do some big work on energy efficiency within their buildings. So it's a work in progress. I think the council leadership of the last 2 to 3 years has done a better job than previously at trying to get us more aligned and to have some projects we can work on together. I see one in the climate action area probably being a great choice, but I'm not really sure what the next agenda is. Maybe one of the things Stacy can remind me is to do some sort of report out about what this next meeting might be and what the topics may be. So, for example, here's something I was disappointed of. When Issaquah High School got rebuilt, there was kind of like joking around that, oh my goodness, here we are building this building with, and the environment in mind, and they didn't put in any water filling stations. And I thought, oh, that's just like insane. And so I had assumed that would be something they would remedy, but a student project ended up finding the funding to remedy it. And I really feel like that sort of highlights where the district is right now, in that, yes, they're putting some thinking into their infrastructure planning, but the students still want to see more than what the administration is providing. So I think there's big opportunities there.
Thanks.
Jamie?
Hi, Mayor. My question was something that we actually covered at our retreat earlier this year, and it was really curious on your thoughts around how we as a board could help or get involved in the budget cycle. That's something that obviously the way money gets spent in the city is really important. And so curious both on timing, like when feedback's most valuable in your opinion, and then if there's certain types of feedback that you think would be helpful or constructive as part of the process.
That's a great question, Jamie. Typically in the past, the boards and commissions have not gotten involved in the budgeting cycle, and primarily for the reason that, my opinion only, you really focus in a certain area of work that the city does. And so for you to feed into the budget process, your advocate that's actually fighting for maintaining environmental programs or getting additional staffing resources is Stacy. And so we are not in a place where we want to be seeing all of our different boards and commissions coming in and advocating for that particular area, so that it's you against the arts, against the planning, who wants us to do some more land use studies. We really rely on the boards and commissions for once the council has approved a budget, that you are able then to work with Stacy to have a work plan developed, that how your work feeds into the council policy and decision making for that year, and reporting back on successes. So we haven't actually used boards and commissions in the past to participate in the budgeting process. If you have thoughts or ideas of how we can do that without making it, one board or commission advocating for just the environment, the arts just advocating for the arts, it's a city commission advocating. If you can figure out a way how we might be able to do that, I'm open to suggestions.
Thank you.
Thanks for the question, Jamie.
Thank you. Anne?
Hey, Mary Lou Polly, thanks for coming tonight. So my question is, do you know if school districts or schools can get funding from the CCA?
I'm not sure about the CCA, but Stacy's probably better able to answer that question. They're definitely able to access any programs that we as a city are offering to get those larger structures and facilities, up to improvements within the energy code. So Stacy, there's no reason that would stop them from applying from the programs that you're talking about, I'm assuming.
No, and there's been some grant opportunities through the CCA that school districts can apply for, and they were even successful with the energy efficiency one, I believe, or tentatively.
That's what I've heard.
Okay.
I don't know if that's been announced yet.
If they actually got their baselines, is that how they fed their estimate into that request that they had? Have they done their work, their homework?
Yeah, so all the bond request was based on the work that McDonald Miller did on all of their things through our program.
That's great. And I think one of the other big things in terms of impacts from the school population is, like, as we all see, that huge string of vehicles dropping people off when we have a system in place already, and the impact that has on greenhouse gas emissions from vehicles is huge. And that's something where I think we have some schools that are in, but I'm not sure typically in the past the school district has wanted to, reach out to the parent community and just you guys should really stop doing this, because this is not in the community's best interest and students' best interest, climate resilience. So they have an interesting relationship with their demographic. Is maybe a little more laid back than we would hope. When you build all the parking stalls, the student cars will come. So if we're going to pretend that we're going to be living in a new urban area, we have to start designing. Well, there's a lot of things about designing schools that we should be changing. So, and also one of the other big things that I need their assistance with on the long-range planning side is that we need to look at what school facilities will be available in Central Issaquah. Central Issaquah will be the most populated part of our city in 20 to 25 years, and we don't want to see everybody driving to school. The whole thing doesn't work if that's where we're going to end up with our future school design. We have asked over the last 6 years for an opportunity to sit down and talk about what Central Issaquah schools or school expansion would look like. And again, that just hasn't gained much traction now. They've really had to focus on this one new high school and then complying with these different regulations. But there is a ton of room for opportunity for improved cooperation, project sharing, all kinds of items with the school district. They can be big gains for us. Big gains.
Awesome, thank you.
Thank you, man.
Thank you, Mayor. Not seeing any other questions. Tonight is all about Stacy and David. We're running through 3 different topics. The annual board report, self-analysis, the 2025 draft environmental board work plan, and then the ICAP priority programs and projects. The first 2 topics, just looking for input tonight. We'll be approving those in December. The last topic is information. So, Stacy, take it away.
Great. Well, thanks, Mayor Polly, for joining us and answering some initial questions. We'll have some more prepared for our next meeting in December and look forward to seeing you again there. Tonight, we were going to walk through the environmental board report. As Dawn said, this is the draft report. Our hope is to get feedback tonight so that we can then vote to approve this in December with the changes that are offered this evening. I walked through the outline last meeting. I will just do a quick run through again and then take feedback, and then we'll transition to David, who did a very quick analysis of the survey that folks filled out. He did that just today. So we'll provide that brief overview of the self-analysis and have a bit of time for discussion prior to incorporating those results into the report. So as a reminder, the annual board report is required to be submitted to council each year by December 31st. It's really a summary of all of the work that we've done as required under our municipal code. The report is broken up into those various requirements. That's the structure we've just used over the last few years. With this version, we have added an additional section at the end that the board requests, and I'll speak to in a moment. So first, we walk through any input that we've been providing on plans and codes. This board did provide feedback on a number of city plans this year. And so that is summarized. And then also all of those letters related to the plans will be attached to the report. Again, then it speaks to providing formal written statements, so summarized here, and then we will be attaching those to the report. There's another section on reviewing research best practices. That one have had a little been unclear of what to summarize in the past. I think there's a little bit more clarity this year. We've had some specific items around urban forestry. Sustainable buildings and infrastructure will be coming at the next meeting. And then just last meeting, we had a presentation on a riparian study. So getting into a little bit more research that may advise, have the board advise on some policy in the future. The natural environment checklist, we've had just one in-person meeting on that topic at our last discussion. We've had some written updates through this year, and we've identified improvements going into 2025. Quick summary of meetings really dedicated to ICAP topics, even though we try to provide written or verbal updates on where we are with implementation. Each meeting, we have had a few meetings that have been dedicated to presenting to you on certain programs. The next section is on recommendations. And again, many of those are summarized in the letters that the board provided each year, and then throughout the year. And then the last 2 items are providing this report and carrying out other duties which we have not been assigned. The new sections the board requested that we add in was to include our 2025 annual work plan. In the past, we haven't developed that until January, February of the current year. So this board report is planning to introduce that draft or preliminary work plan. And then the board also requested a summary of gaps or concerns be included. These are items that we've identified throughout the year that we think need some additional, or that you all think need additional attention from the city, including staffing around the environment, engagement of the school district, climate, and then a bit of information around where we might be going in terms of having conversations around further climate investments. So this section is new this year. And then the rest of the board report will include a summary of all the agendas, topics that we had each meeting. We will attach all of the letters or recommendations that were written to council or other boards and commissions, the self-analysis results, and there's one other item. And then our proposed work plan will also be included, which we'll be discussing later this evening. So that's a quick overview of the annual report. We are looking for any feedback that folks have, any gaps, revisions that you'd like to see made. If there's wordsmithing revisions, you can send those to me after the meeting as well. But happy to discuss any of it.
So I have a question before I provide my feedback, and that is, when you present this to council, is it set with a cover memo similar to what you provided to us and then just attached?
Correct.
Okay. So the cover memo will generally look like the memo you provided to us, correct?
Yeah, the cover memo for providing this type of report would be very, just to introduce the memo essentially, because all the content is, or excuse me, introduce the report because all the content is included in the report.
So my comment to you is on the cover memo that accompanies this, since we have two new sections that we've identified that we think are important for the council to see, and they're buried at the bottom of the overall report. They may not get the attention of the council that we would like with this. So I would request that in your cover memo to the council that you identify that we have two new sections, and perhaps put them in your cover memo so that they actually see them. And I would suggest doing that each time. If there's something the board wants from council or needs direction or wants them to pay attention to, the rest of the stuff is kind of the same stuff over and over. This is what we've been doing. You've already seen us give letters, but we're asking for something from council, and it would be helpful if that was a little more upfront from you. That's just my feedback. Thank you. Great call.
Thank you, Jamie.
Yeah, I think some of what Nancy said, I think really resonates for me. Some of it's just like, how are we pulling in the really important priorities? What do we want to get across in a message? Because there's a lot of words here. A lot of it's like kind of our report card looking back. And so what are those key messages that we want to make sure that council hears if they only read an executive summary? So I do think that memo is really a critical tool. And some of the things that I don't necessarily see captured, or they're kind of hidden, just like thinking through, like if we're more forward looking on what is important, at least that's my opinion on what's important in 2025 in environmentally related topics. I mean, I think, well, for one, like we've talked a few times about the like kind of lack of oversight across natural environment topics. Like it's a bunch of different staff members. Realistically, we're probably not going to get a new staff member with budget where it's at. So what are the alternatives to identifying how we can track and understand across what Dan's doing with urban forest management, all the other kind of more code-based things that we're working on for Title 18 updates. How are we measuring this? How can we, as a board, but also as a city, track our performance against those goals? I think is just something that our national environment checklist is just not doing that. And I think we've been trying to get it there. It just isn't, it's never gotten very close in my opinion to where that can be. So I think that's one kind of theme that trying to understand and make sure that we can track. We're going to do an ICAP update, making sure that that's more measurable, more track. Like I think how we're tracking those really key areas of what we're doing is something that I would hope is a focus for the next year. And then I think the final thought here was we talk about like urban forest management plan is going to be a big focus for next year. One of the things that feedback that I had during that meeting that I'm curious on other board members' thoughts was, it was, and And I don't know exactly how that plan is going to get implemented, but if it's anything like ICAP, where there's like a staff liaison, Dan, or Stacy with ICAP, and then a board that's the main board that's involved with that. I think at the time that was going to be Parks, which is more about, I think, Dan's reporting relationship than like who actually has a lot of, has expertise, and I think a lot of focus on canopy. So that's one other thing that I think we may, if other board members agree, that seems like a decision that I would want to have highlighted, that it seems like the environmental board is the appropriate board to provide feedback and kind of ongoing oversight. It all also ties into, if we're looking at what is going to be great to track overall progress in natural environment, the urban forest management plan is going to be one of the best tools going forward on where we might get that. So I'm curious from other board members if you agree with me there, because I think that it'd be great if you do, to kind of voice that so that that can be something that we include here.
I second what Jamie said.
I agree.
I do agree, but I think the forestry management plan is going to be important to parks too. So it's going to be kind of a push or pull between the two. And you see, we have a joint meeting proposed in, July. Talk about that with the Parks Board. Are you requesting that that plan live with the Environmental Board and not with the Parks Board, or a mixture?
Well, I guess it seems much more logical that looking at the subject matter in that there is some that touches on what is happening in parks. A lot of times what happens in parks is actually at odds with canopy cover. Like they're having to make decisions. It's kind of a conflict of interest in some ways, because it's like they're the ones advocating for fields and things that actually aren't great. So it just seems kind of like an odd pairing for that to be the board that would be, and I don't know what the city's plans are. This was something that Dan, I think, was going to take away, but yeah, anyways, yes, I think the short answer is yes.
I can highlight that in the memo. Dan and I had an initial conversation about the plan is written, so he will, once adopted from council, he will have his direction for implementing the plan and probably doing joint reporting to both park board and environmental board, joint meetings where possible, where he'd report out on progress. And then of course, if there's programs or policy related to the plan where feedback is needed, would probably be touching base with both boards. So that's at least the initial conversation we've had, and trying to do more joint meetings where possible, where there's overlap. But that's for further discussion. That was very initial.
But to go on with that topic, I think that's been the challenge of this board in not focusing on the environment to the extent. I mean, Stacy's really focused on sustainability and climate change, appropriately so. That's really what we're looking. But we really are an environmental board looking at more than just climate change and sustainability. And I agree with Jamie that the urban forest plan really should be here because we're the environmental board. It is an environmental topic. It's not a parks topic. That's just my opinion. Thank you.
I have a question. Does sharing it with the Parks Board diminish it somehow? Like, what is the negative of sharing the urban forest plan with the Environmental Board and the Parks Board?
I don't know. I think that's a question for the Parks Department. How do they plan to implement it into their park system? Is it going to be integral to their other parks, to their more developed parks, or is it going to be a standalone program? I've seen different models of different cities on how they do it.
I would think if it enhances what they're doing with parks, then it would be a bonus to have them be really involved in it as well.
And I think it'd be similar to kind of how we manage the ICAP or other plans are managed, where when we are proposing to implement a program within that plan where we need feedback from certain boards based on their expertise, we go to other boards besides the environmental board for feedback on the ICAP. Equity board, probably be doing more with transportation advisory board in the future, park board. So I don't see the urban forest management plan necessarily needing to be kind of owned by one board, but really depending on the programs and plans that are being implemented, Dan will be touching base with those different boards and probably looking mostly to the Park Board, Environmental Board, since that falls within the expertise. But I can have further conversations with him and the parks team and kind of see where they are. But I don't necessarily think that a plan needs to be assigned one board as kind of a owner. Really lives across all of the city boards and commissions.
Me?
Yeah, when I was working with Dan, I know that I did some work like looking at the urban forest management plan, and I think that for the most part it was kind of being untouched by or like unfocused on or like pushed out of the way. And I think a lot of the language also is more specific to the park board, but I wonder if there's like revisions in the like smaller actions that we can take towards the goals that are outlined in there, because I think that a lot of it is also like long term, and I don't know when the last time it was updated was, but I think it was before COVID, and so a lot of that is like unaligned with goals that the sustainability plan has. And so,
Okay, thank you. Other comments on our annual report? All right, do you guys want to go into that self-announcement?
Great. Yeah. And what I can do, I'll definitely emphasize the items that were brought up this evening in the memo, and I can provide the board with that draft memo as well, so you have a chance to provide that feedback.
All right. So as was mentioned, I threw these slides together a couple hours ago. We wanted to wait until the last minute so that as many folks as possible could provide their self-analysis, self-assessment to us to pull into this. So apologies for not getting these out ahead of time. There we go. But we will send these out. Yeah. So self-analysis. At a quick glance, we had 10 out of 12 board members complete the assessment this year. That is up from 8 last year. So that's exciting, and that's some great participation. Overall, the environmental board members felt good about their contribution to the city, felt positively about the depth and level that the board has been able to dig into and dive into plans, reports, things like that. The environmental board has felt positively about staff support and about the breadth and types of topics that are coming to the board. There are definitely some suggestions for improvements, including on the meeting process and then some of the feedback loops. So some of what we had talked about earlier, but making sure that there is continued conversation between administration, council, et cetera, and the board. So I'll dig into those a little bit in a minute. So just to start off with some highlights, these are some of the most positive pieces of the self-assessment, things that came out there. There's a spelling error, so sorry about that, but the board was appreciative of the opportunity for thoughtful and thorough feedback of a lot of topics. So there's definitely some appreciation for being able to dive in depth into different topics. There was some perspectives around wanting to be able to touch on many different types of projects. And so sometimes kind of different projects coming back to the board multiple times could have felt like a lot for some folks. But for the most part, folks felt very appreciative of diving into the topics. Additionally, the topics brought to the environmental board were all relevant and valuable. And you'll see kind of one of the switch opposite sides of that on the next slide. But staff and presenters have supported the environmental board well over the last year and came to the environmental board prepared with their presentations. Environmental board members have felt that this was generally a positive experience, joining the board, providing feedback to the city, getting more involved into what the city has done and is doing related to all things environment. And then the final one that I wanted to highlight for now is that support for new environmental board members has improved this year. However, we want to continue to expand support for new members. There's definitely some things that we've talked about, and so that was something that was noted as a positive, and something that board members noted that we wanted to continue pushing forward next year. So a couple opportunities for improvement. This is not everything. This is just some summaries here, but one of the ones that was talked about most was improving those feedback loops between environmental board recommendations, what was implemented, and how those recommendations were taken by the administration and by council. So making sure that staff and council can report back to the environmental board on how we're receiving comments and recommendations on programs and policies, and making sure that that is a strong feedback loop there. There are a lot of topics to cover. The environmental board noted that they were all valuable and relevant topics, but that there are a lot of them, and that at times it has been difficult, that we've had some long meetings, lots to review, things like that. And so there was an interest in thinking about prioritizing the topics that are coming to the board to make sure that the board is focusing in on those topics that are most important for the city and most important for this board to look at. There was interest. There was a lot of environmental board engagement on plans, documents this year, as was noted before. But there was also some interest in the self-analysis on providing feedback and getting more involved in some more initiatives and project level work that staff are doing as well. So that's kind of jumping in from kind of that higher level, looking down at citywide plans, long range plans, things like that, and jumping into giving a little bit more feedback into specific projects and initiatives. There was interest from multiple board members on exploring opportunities for more community involvement and engagement, both in what staff are doing, so making sure that the work that we're doing with the Climate Action Plan is getting out, Climate Action Plan and other environmental initiatives are getting out to the community, as well as thinking about ways to involve the community in the work of the environmental board itself, right? So that's definitely something that we'll get to dig into there. And then there were a number of different specific process recommendations. So some of those were related to things like reports or summaries that could be provided to the environmental board on what we've been discussing, what we had previously discussed on different topics, things like that. One of my favorites was a request for some more informal gatherings and environmental board bonding and kind of support and field trips, things like that type of stuff as well. So there were also some of those specific recommendations on how we could improve there. And then the final piece from the self-assessment for right now, these were the items in order that were of highest interest to the board based on the rankings from the self-assessment. So the urban forest management plan was the item that was identified by the most environmental board members as being of interest to the board, followed by transportation planning, ICAP action updates, decarbonization efforts, both for the city and the community. So that's thinking about what we're doing at our city operations, as well as our programs and policies to support community-wide decarbonization. And then wildlife corridors. And then the final one here was the ICAP update process, which is planned for 2025 and 2026. Although these are the top 6, all of the priorities that were on that self-assessment did get votes. So folks across the environmental board do have a wide range of interests and are interested in all of the topics from waste management to these identified here. And then there were also some other great ideas provided by board members as well, written in ideas. So thinking about some of the public works plans, and so stormwater, sewer plans, things like that, as well as looking at the interface between wildlife and waste management. So there are a number of other good ideas that were provided for staff to consider bringing in the future. So with that was my quick and rough pull together of information from the self-assessment, but we'll be diving more into it in the next couple of weeks and kind of putting that information more together. So that's what I have there. Any questions or thoughts on the self-assessment? Folks can either provide more, any thoughts on what they've seen, or add to anything that I summarized.
Are we going to see a more detailed version of the self-assessment?
Yes, it will be in the report. It'll be included as part of the report, so that'll be in the December packet. But yeah, I think now we were just looking for any reflections on that. We can definitely have some more discussion in December. Does this reflect how you all filled out the survey? Any questions or feedback?
Yeah, I don't have feedback. I think, thanks for pointing out the other day. The question that I was going to ask the board was both new members and youth members, if there's anything in particular that, I mean, obviously your feedback is sprinkled in here, but if there's anything that, well, it sounds like things were an improvement from previous years, if there's any ideas, or it doesn't have to be just first year members, but anyone on that topic. I think that was something that definitely came out of the retreat. That's a big topic. So if there's any thoughts from new board members on improvements or things that worked really well that we should consider focusing on above, just hearing.
I don't have any comment.
Okay.
Basically, needs.
Asking any other comment on that. I'm going to pause there for just a second because thank you, Connie. Connie wanted to have a chance for public comments here.
Connie, you're muted on our end. You should be able to unmute. There you go. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just was making sure that that was for me. So, Connie Marsh, I live on Squaw. So, y'all are my favorite board because you are thoughtful, you do your work, and you actually question and you make the city far better. And so I appreciate you all, and I'm here to tell you I don't say that very often. So, there you go. On the issues that I see with the board being successful are that the information that is provided to the board is not necessarily the most pertinent or the heaviest hitting pieces of the world that I personally think should be provided. When I look at our long-term transportation program and I see that that is not being brought to the board, even though it is being threaded through our comprehensive plan, I think these are the conversations for our long-term future that need to be provided to the board in advance. And these are policy level changes on what we want our city to be in 20 years. And they gave you the language, but you never got to have a conversation about how it all works together and how transportation can transform to make the city different. And so then when I look at the budget and I see that Metroflex was initially removed from the budget, one of our new transit things, and instead we're funding a whole bunch of new vehicles, you go, wait a second, okay, let's have a conversation about what the balance of this looks like and how it can work in reality. And I don't know how to get that style of conversation to the environmental board, because that is actually how the city works. They funnel bits of information to you.
And Stacy cannot see everything. And I often see things go through that have not gotten to the environmental board that should have been to the environmental board. And I'm not sure how they end up at council committee before they end up, or if they never end up in the environmental board. So the process for prioritizing what you all look at is not transparent to you. And so a discussion about how you prioritize and who gets to choose what you see is one of the things that I think is lacking here. So, yeah, I think maybe 4 or 5 of those things have happened in the last 2 months. And it makes me crazy because you all would have something to say about it that would be very important. So anyway, you all are wonderful. I appreciate everything you do, and I'm hoping for a better year next year, even. Thank you.
With that, close that one and move on to the next topic. So the 2025 Draft Environmental Board Work Plan.
Great. So over the last few months, we have been working just internally with staff to identify topics to come to the board in 2025. We have not yet incorporated the input from the self-analysis, but glad to see that many of the topics you all saw as a priority or ranked as a priority are reflected in the work plan. There's definitely a few gaps that we'll talk about. And then also we can have a conversation around the more informal engagements and field trips. Is that something we were also looking to propose for next year? So I was just going to pull up our draft work plan, capture any additional comments. Again, we will be taking the results from the self-analysis and working with lead staff on those topics to build into this work plan. But did want to get some initial feedback tonight. And then in December, we'll be looking for kind of a thumbs up vote on this. It is a flexible work plan. We adjust it almost every month, depending on if there's changes in timing for things going to council or sometimes urgent topics arise. So just keep that in mind that there are adjustments made throughout the year. Would it be helpful? Do folks want me to kind of walk through at least what's sketched out here? Have you all had a chance to look at it and just want to jump into feedback? I can give kind of a general summary of our thought for the year. If that's helpful. Oh, Raj, go ahead.
Hi, Stacey. And so this is a generic question, not necessarily specific to the work plan. I know we talked about it that, you will be updating some of the reports which keep coming back to the board, like ICAP. And, there will be some kind of summary or what's done so far so that, when next time it comes in front of the board, whichever members want to choose, they have the opportunity, whoever wants to choose, they have the opportunity to look at, kind of refresh themselves before they look at the report again. I thought you had sent an email, but I don't quite remember it. So I wanted to check what was the status on that and if it's possible to look at that once in a while, especially before, the ICAP update or some of these things keep coming back up.
Yeah, I think, Praj, let me know if this is not what you're referring to, but we did, in preparation for the board retreat last January, and then cleaned up a document that provides a summary of kind of major codes, policy, plans, and then a summary of where the board has engaged on those topics over the years. We are working to try and keep that updated so we can send out that resource guide again. For example, it will summarize the meetings where the board touched Title 18 or the comprehensive plan, so you can refer back to those meetings if you need a bit of the background, but then we'll also provide a brief written summary on what the board has discussed and engaged on. Is that,
Yeah,
was that the topic?
Right.
Okay, or the document?
correct. That's what
Yeah.
I was talking about. But the only thing is, and I don't know how often you update it. I'm not necessarily adding more work or wanting you to update it every time. But especially for the reports like ICAP and, capital improvement plan, these things keep coming back. So, it's good to know, especially for the members who have not been with the board for a long time. I just would like to look at it before I see what's going on now on the report on the plan.
Yeah, thanks. We do try to keep that updated regularly based on the topics that have been brought to the board. We can resend that out so folks can favor that link and refer back to it. And then within the memos for our topics, we usually include information on resources or past board discussions. We're trying to improve that. And basically it would be information pulled from that resource guide. So you all don't have to remember to look back at that resource guide. So that's something we're continuing to work on. So at least within the memo you receive for the board packet, you'll have that summary of when the board has touched that topic before, and have a brief summary of where the board landed on the topic.
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you.
Great. And then just specifically to the ICAP updates, I will just note we're preparing a detailed update for council right now. That will go to them in early December. We will make sure you all see that prior to going to council. So that one will have an update on all of the actions that we're working on in the ICAP.
Thank you.
Rod, Nancy?
I have a request for addition to the January meeting.
Yes.
And that is, given what Mayor Polly said about the budget implications, it would be really helpful if we heard what happened with the budget, not only in your department or your sustainability, but clearly there's things that will happen in parks and community development, since we saw a lot of comp plan and things like that going through, to kind of get a feel for, because the budget sets the priorities for each of the departments. It sets what your work plan is. And since it's not approved, the council clearly is weighing in on that at this time. It would be helpful if we knew what the council's priorities were, since that's coming through, that signal's coming through the budget.
Great. Absolutely. Great.
Nancy, Alex?
This was just adding on to what Rashid said as a suggestion on how to get us to remember to go back and get that document. As you sent out those great emails like a few days before, and you could include the link in there so that I remember to go and check it every time. But if it's in there, I'll remember to go and check it. So that would be helpful.
Tom?
Yes, I just want to reflect on the priorities that you saw from the survey that, okay, transportation was like number 2. That's cool. That's one of the topics which is near and dear to my heart. The multimodal transportation corridors. These are key things to get in our pipeline here to improve livability and environmental footprint. It is Issaquah coming forward. All right, so I see that there is 1 month here. We have the mobility plan implementation update in September. So let's say we increase review of transportation related stuff. What are we going to throw out? So how will that juggling act be performed? Are we going to vote on it, or how do you envision that trade-off to be made?
That's a great question. That's something I typically consult with the chair, vice chair, as we have new topics come on or something urgent. I reach out to them, or we might sit down and kind of prioritize where we're overloaded on meetings.
It's it's a difficult thing because these are all good topics, but they're limited resources.
Right.
And one of the things we did talk about last when we had our retreat, if memory serves, was, well, all right, the whole board reviews every topic. We could fragment into subcommittees that focused on specific areas in order to parallel our work. That is something that could be done. It would be more overhead, certainly on your end, run that show that way. But that would be something we could do if we wanted to keep the breadth, but yet focus and some specific prioritized areas more in depth.
Yeah.
That's all.
Yeah, one area or one approach we've had to when we've had so many topics coming forward is looking at where we can move to written updates, especially if it's just an informational update. And so you've probably been noticing a lot of written updates in the board packet where we would want to prioritize for conversation, plans that need input, any proposed policies, those types of things that have, that we really need the board's verbal feedback on versus something where we just wanted to update the board. So that's where we're trying to kind of balance out our meeting agendas as well.
Can you check with Kisha and see if it's legal for us to put together subgroups to dig into topics in more detail? I'm thinking visibility is it under the way the board operates, will we allow it?
Yeah, I believe we had that conversation after the retreat. We can do that. Of course, if there's a quorum, it's a public meeting. So it is more work on us to make sure agendas are developed and published and we're holding a public meeting. But we can break into subcommittees as needed. That could be something we talk about for next year with the ICAP update or CIP that's coming, things like that. Some of these bigger topics where maybe folks want to consider a subcommittee that can dig in a little bit deeper. So, but yeah, I can work with Tisha just to kind of lay out what the process and rules are for subcommittees.
Jamie?
So, one topic, just looking at that priority list and wildlife corridors, I think it was 3 or 4. And I think just generally the topic of wildlife, I think that was maybe, there weren't a lot of wildlife topics, so that I feel like that's maybe a proxy for wildlife. And just looking through our work plan, we don't really have, it would sort of in like, riparian report is probably like indirect. I think that like one of the best parts about the natural environment are the animals that live in it. And we so frequently lose that in our conversations. And so I think, I personally don't really understand what are the big barriers, like wildlife corridor barriers. What should we be thinking about there? And then the thing that you keep hearing from me about that I really think we need to address is the impact of not like where we talk a lot about waste diversion at the landfill. But what about before the landfill? And like I live in Old Town, and in the last 2 weeks, it's over half the days I walk my dog every morning. Half the days over half the days. Overturned trash cans, overturned compost bins. And the last time this happened, this bear is on its way to the same outcome that the mama bear and 3 cubs from a couple years ago that they got moved and then they ended up having it euthanized. And I don't think people know this, but there's also like, even if they did, there's not really any consequence for doing that. And so like, that's another topic that I'm passionate about. I've mentioned multiple times here. And like, I know we have the waste management I can't remember the title of the person, but like that to me is like something that we need to be talking about and this board should be talking about, and that the city, and it sounds like there are conversations, but that's just how we impact wildlife is something that I don't think we spend enough time on in general. And I think there's a couple different topics that are timely for us to spend some time on.
So there's not a wildlife corridor plan or something that we can specifically comment on, but it rolls into a bunch of other plans. Forest management plan, riparians, how kind of some of the code. So I would ask that let's think about that a little bit and where we can influence that.
Yeah, we've had a pending topic for 2 years on wildlife corridors because we had talked with Doug, who was at our last meeting, about doing a study that keeps being delayed because of budget issues in the planning department, but it's still something that's on their radar. So definitely keep these ones and some of the other topics around kind of coexisting and we can include. And yeah.
Studies on existing wildlife corridors that are known.
Yeah, there are a few. So great. We'll make sure that makes it in this year.
Alex?
This is just like a process comment. Can you send, when you send this back out to us, can you have the track changes on it? So we can
Yes.
see what was added and
Yes.
what's going to take, if anything gets removed because we're too busy. Since we're track that.
I think I have more thoughts on this that we'll probably talk about later in the meeting, but to me, like when I hear what Jamie's saying, I think this all really, a lot of this boils down to community engagement, which we really only have, I think, once. Because so much of, I think, what we're trying to do, it feels sometimes like we're, 12 of us trying to save the world. And, before I was even asked if I was interested in any of it, I didn't even know you guys existed. And I'm a business owner in Issaquah, and it's 16 years now, right? So I just am wondering if we're sometimes making our lives harder by not, thinking about what the community can help us do, because we are one voice, but if the community is behind us and they know who we are and what we're trying to do, is that going to help our cause? And I think my comments will be probably what we're talking about later. In some ways, maybe we can connect with the community. Just a thought.
It's the only comment I would have to add. Did you have something, John?
Yeah, I just think that the plan needs some space in it, some open space and open time for developing new ideas.
Mm-hmm.
It's chock full of football. There's, Jamie's brought up something that is not a plan. And I've got some ideas and things that we can talk about. If we had some free space at every meeting or every other meeting to brainstorm on new things the city can do.
Great.
The only thing I would add is that when you're bringing some of these, like I see CIP up there quite a bit, bring them early enough that we can influence the decision making. So not at the 11th hour when the document's going to final print.
Yeah. That's great. Great. I can just highlight a couple of things. Some of these will be talking.
To that?
Yeah.
Particularly the transportation plan, since that's one of our high priorities.
Yeah.
If it's not coming till November, is that what you said, or whenever it was? It's probably pretty well cooked by the time it gets to us. Sorry.
Nope.
Yeah, it's September, Nancy.
Yeah,
it's listed as an update, so
Would that mean that we don't have any influence on it?
I don't know. That's it.
That would be an update on implementation that's underway. So,
Oh, it's already crafted and it's just an update on how the progress is.
correct. Yeah, I'll need to talk with staff about if there's an actual update on David if you put you on the spot.
Well, they have to have it sent to the state by June.
Okay.
And they brought it to us last year, so to get funding,
Oh, for
grant
the-
funds, the TIP.
You're talking about the TIP,
Yeah,
not the
it's not
mobility.
on our agenda.
Yes. Yeah, I was thinking about the mobility plan. Great. I will reach out to John. It will be included as part of the CIP. But I can see if there's another aspect of that he can bring to us separately. I was just going to highlight a couple things that are outside of David and my work plan that we'll be talking about in a minute. That will likely be big topics. I don't have any timelines yet, so some of these are guesses, but the CIP, a year and a half ago was really the first time the boards and commissions were involved in that. So I'm anticipating there'll be additional engagement. We had draft environmental and climate criteria that were incorporated into the CIP last year. I hope and expect and will advocate that we have an opportunity to improve upon those. They're really just a starter criteria. So that may be a focus of the spring. Want to have an opportunity for you all to hear from the students again. I thought those were really fantastic presentations last June, and we have a number of additional student projects underway. So we'll be inviting them back to present. Urban forest management plan. We anticipate coming for at least 2 touch points. And then there's other big items you'll be hearing about David and I in just a minute. The one thing we did want to get some feedback on is as was shown in the self-analysis, which was great, is we'd like to have some more informal gatherings, either outside of our meetings or in place of our meetings. We have some students working on a geocaching project that could be a fun tour to get us all out and geocache. But really looking for other ideas. I know several of you are forest stewards. John's got monthly litter pickup, but just really looking for opportunities. If you all want to lead a field trip with the board or have an idea, let us know and we can see if it either would be a good evening option to replace our meeting, or we can put it out as an optional addition.
I think it'd be fun to help John pick up garbage.
Very fun. Yeah.
Really welcome that.
Yeah. Great. And you could put that on as kind of an April first month one too.
In that same vein, so I'm involved with the Seattle Urban Carnivore Project, and there are a couple cameras on Tiger Mountain that my team manages. I don't know if that would be within the scope of what the board would be interested in, but anyway, we could take a field trip to visit the cameras.
That'd be fun.
If the management approves that, I don't know, Seattle Urban Carnivore Project run by the Woodland Park Zoo might have opinions about that. I don't think it should be.
Yeah. I used to run the ones on Cougar, not anymore.
Jamie?
Yeah, there's just one thing I wanted to mention. Harkening back to like one of the initial conversations we had about the urban forest management plan and like ownership. I think it's less about ownership, but it's one thing that kind of stood out in this conversation is the difference in the amount of updates we get on the ICAP, for example, versus what's going on with transportation. And obviously it's not apples to apples, but I think that like one of the things I'm most interested in is not like who has ownership, but like, is Dan going to be sending the same level of updates that you do on ICAP to us? Or is it because it's own, like, those are the type, like, I think just how do we make sure that we can stay engaged? And it's not like going outside of, like, transportation right now, it feels like it's like fighting upstream to get any engagement on it. How do we make sure that's not how the urban forest management? And I don't think it will, because that's not Dan. I think we're more closely aligned in transportation probably with what happens there. But I think this is a good example of like, we've been talking about it for years and it's still hard on transportation. And how do we just make sure that's not the case on urban forest management, that it's not like by default, it's not coming to us kind of thing. So just, I don't need to respond, but I just think this is a good example that brought this to mind.
One just quick thought on that is that there is the Transportation Advisory Board. So like for the transportation plan, there's a specific board where that owns the plan very much like ICAP and this plan and this board. Whereas to the conversation earlier, there's less of a direct board ownership.
Parks.
Right.
They were like the equivalent of TAB for transportation would have been parks for urban forest management. So that's my point.
Sure.
Is that, yeah, I think that's what I'm saying. Yeah.
Great.
Jonathan?
I was just thinking about tours. I took the college tour. I thought that was
Right.
pretty good. But other tours that we could potentially do is something about the city's utilities or specifically water quality, where we get our water, how's it tested, where is it sourced. That would be
Great.
I just happened to be looking for this for a different project. And the city has a whole report on that, which I can forward to the environmental group if you guys are interested. Yeah, talks all about city's water. Have you guys seen that?
Yeah, it goes out to every resident September, I want to say.
Oh, okay.
Published. Yeah, so each resident should receive that.
Annual water quality.
Yep.
It's required.
If that's the same one that you're.
Requirement of all water purveyors to send out annually, and it has to describe where your water comes from, what's in your water, the sampling efforts the city undertakes along with their partners to test your water, and then those kind of things. So you should be able to find on the city's website if you type in annual water quality.
Is that the same one, Anne, or was there a different?
I think so, yeah. It's
Okay.
on the website.
Do you know if there's a similar thing for, say, air quality?
There's not. That we're
Seems like that's something that would fit pretty well with, contact.
The CCA has a whole bunch of the air quality monitor projects going on that are funded. So maybe we can look to see if there's one near us. I can forward, there's a map from Clean and Prosperous that has all of the projects and where they are and their updates and where they're at. So I can forward that, and would that be helpful? Because I don't know if the city of Issaquah can do one itself.
Yeah, I was wondering if the Puget Sound Clean Air Authority,
Yeah.
if they publish something. I can check.
But there's going to be a ton more monitoring stations around because of the CCA.
Great.
Yeah.
I'm gonna, one last comment for Alex, and then we're gonna end it on that because we're punching against time.
I don't think I added this as a topic on the work self-assessment, but just add stormwater on their topics.
Stormwater improvement.
Yeah, stormwater management,
Stormwater.
especially in, like relative to 6 ppd and other toxics.
I can talk for hours now.
Be a guest presenter.
Yeah. A lot of great ideas there. Yeah, the other thing I was thinking, to Dixie, your point, at the sustainability fair, maybe the board would be up for having a table. I know a lot of you will probably have your own tables there, but just thinking about ways to get out in the community or farmers market, things like that. Share what we're doing. So great. Well, David and I will incorporate the feedback from the self-analysis and all of the input tonight, and then present you all with updated draft work plan in December for your, we'll be looking for a thumbs up approval.
Thanks, Stacy. So next you got the ICAP priority programs and projects. And this is just informational for us.
Yeah, I think we will be looking for input. So we wanted to walk through what David and I have set as priorities for next year. A lot of these are very reflective in the budget. If folks have had an opportunity to look at the mayor's proposed budget. We, of course, are still waiting for budget approval. And so some of these may be revised if there are significant changes to the budget. Tonight, I want to just see if there's feedback, questions from the board. And then, of course, if there are areas of interest or gaps that you see, to let us know. We would most likely need to go out and look for funding for those particular areas. But we'll do so if they're of interest to the board and something that you're really seeing as a gap or things that we aren't thinking of or aren't planning to pursue next year. All right. So as mentioned, kind of the feedback we're looking for tonight is, do our priorities align with the board's expectations for where we're planning to focus on ICAP implementation 2025? Are there any other areas that you would want us to prioritize? And then also looking for opportunities where we might be able to further engage the community. So David and I will both be speaking through a set of the priorities, mostly to focus around decarbonization, facilities and fleet, resilience, waste, and our greenhouse gas inventory. We'll also have a ICAP update that we'll be starting over this next year, and we're looking at policies and, of course, pursuing grant funding. That's just a quick highlight of what we'll be digging into. So one of our major areas of focus, as it is our largest source of greenhouse gas emissions, is on residential and commercial building decarbonization. We have several programs already that are focused on incentives for decarbonizing residents, as well as energy efficiency in commercial buildings. We are also, most of those programs offer this number of education opportunities. The key programs we're focused on are continuation of Energy Smart East Side, right now focused on heat pumps, although we're looking at expanding that program into other incentives. Our Clean Buildings program, which is mostly focused on the larger buildings, commercial, nonprofit, multifamily. We also have a program that will continue through April of 2025, encouraging businesses and residents to purchase or enroll in green power. We will be piloting a new electrification incentive in Issaquah, looking at the results of that, and then considering a regional expansion. And then we're also looking at potentially a pilot for a weatherization program, and then also another solar program. If folks were here in 2018, we ran the Solarize program, and we are pursuing a contract with the organization to do another program this spring.
You're taking the feedback as you go on?
Sure. Yeah, feel free to jump in.
Any chance you might include in your list an outreach to the chamber to try and get some of the commercial and some of the buildings and some of those folks involved in some of this?
We would love that. We have tried doing a few webinars and presentations and having chamber share information on our Clean Buildings program. If folks have contacts at the chamber or an inn or other ideas, would appreciate
the director of the chamber.
It's been about 1.5 years since we first launched the program, so probably overdue for another outreach. But we work mostly through our economic development team because they're the primary contact. But yeah, worth another outreach for sure.
Pam?
Oh, yes. I almost forgot what I was going to ask. So I heard that possibly some of your CCA grants didn't get approved. I'm wondering what those projects were that didn't get approved and if you're planning on reapplying.
Yeah, we are putting together a summary of all the grants that have been approved, are pending, and that have not been approved for our ICAP update to council. We have a couple of solar grants that were not approved, but we have submitted those to PSE for their solar program, so we're still waiting on those. We have a couple pending.
Say which ones those are.
Which grants they are, or which for Senior Center and Pickering Park. We've submitted twice, and now we're waiting for PSE. There's huge demand, I think, in limited funding, but we have, through the Solar Plus Storage Grant David managed, we have all the plans drawn up for those, so we're ready to go to contract once we receive the funding. We can talk about this later, but we do have some funding in our city budget that would go towards solar projects too. And then we're waiting on a couple.
Yeah, so for the most part, the grants that we haven't gotten have been more focused on city operations decarbonization. Most of the residential and commercial building decarbonization grants have been successful overall. And the reason the city hasn't been as successful on our own facilities is just there's a mix of different things. We don't have huge buildings, right? A lot of those grants are going to the bigger buildings. We are not a community identified as being overburdened by environmental justice considerations from the state map. So there are kind of a couple different reasons where I still think we put in very good applications. But we do, yes, absolutely. So we do try and highlight things like the freeway and pull out pieces of those maps to help make our case. But for the most part, our grants have been very successful on the residential side and more middling success on the city operations side, but we're still continuing to try.
Alice?
Just a thought on like community outreach and workplace programs. And do you have business owners or residents who participated and may be interested in hosting an open house or a coffee clash type of situation, meeting with staff and like somehow incentivizing people to come and learn more about the program at the business where it's taking place?
That's a great idea. We were just talking about for our new electrification pilot to do some open houses. We hadn't talked about having them hosted at other locations, so great.
Jamie?
The question on the pilot, is the pilot a contractor facing incentive by chance, or is it?
We just wrapped up community engagement to get feedback on that. So we're evaluating either a rebate/reimbursement option where the city cuts a check after the homeowner has paid for the equipment. We're looking at a contractor option. We're even exploring like a Lowe's rebate, a Home Depot rebate. So we're looking at all those options, taking feedback we just got from a survey and focus groups to advise on.
This probably meetings ago, but or we can get a broader group of contractors and not rely on people that want to decarbonize, but that are thinking about and already need to replace a system in their home. Those will be the people that you can shift with much less money than having to pay for the whole system or pay for a huge portion of the system. So like, I hope that we can find a way through either what the city's doing or Energy Smart East Side to get expanded group beyond the Mitsubishi contractors.
Yes.
The other piece related to that, I'm guessing once all the HERE money becomes available, that will be a big focus.
Yes.
Because that is obviously a huge chunk of money. I don't know how many of our citizens are going to be, how many people here will be eligible for it, but I don't know how that factors into the plan or what your team is thinking about for how that'll be communicated.
Yeah, a lot of our programs right now were meant to kind of fill the need until those federal dollars come. I can't remember off the top of my head the income qualifications for those, but I believe they're going to be lower than what we've been able to offer at the state level and may rely on some federal poverty rates. So there may still be a need for us to continue our incentives for the slightly higher income brackets or up to moderate income in this county. So, but yes, we're expecting to hear more from Commerce on that federal funding program over the next few months, because I believe they're planning to roll it out summer or quarter 3 or quarter 4 next year.
Wow, so we're kind of late.
I think it's taking a while. Yeah, so if folks aren't aware, these are federal dollars that states could apply for basically electrification incentive programs. So to help fund low income households with heat pumps and other electric appliances and equipment. The state, through the Climate Commitment Act, has also had what they call HERE funding, that we have some of that to run programs right now, but we'll have federal dollars coming in the future. And there's programs run, I think about 20 states have programs up and running all over the country. So.
Great. Anne, you have another question, or are you?
No, sorry.
Great. So yeah, this is a really big focus of our staff. Winley, our AmeriCorps fellow, you all haven't had a chance to meet yet because she teaches dance on Wednesday nights. She is going to be focusing in on a lot of these programs as well over her time with the city. And then waste, this is a large part of the ICAP. It is not something David and I manage, so I just wanted to mention it here. You will be hearing from our solid waste analyst in December, Sam Tarvin. She'll be presenting her work plan for 2025 to you all. She is planning on a number of food waste prevention initiatives, probably looking at updating some city policies around food waste and construction and demolition waste. And then also looking at expanding our reuse and repair programming, primarily around education workshops and events. So it's very quick here. She'll have a lot more to share with you all in December.
This might be a quick place for me to just throw in my 2 cents about community engagement. And I know we don't necessarily manage this, but I think this is an interesting place for us to think about entering the conversation with community members. Because I think a lot of the things that we talk about, they probably care about, but maybe not as deeply as most of us would. But almost everybody has thoughts about waste because it affects them every single day. And I think there's a couple of thoughts that we might want to consider. I don't necessarily know how we would do this, but like we have the sustainability fair. I think there's lots of cities that do that host like recycling events, hard to recycle events. We tried to do one last year, not with the city, but like it was me and it was very grassroots. I think we had like 5 people show up, but like there's a lot of stuff that's hard to recycle, but there's a lot of companies that can do that. So I think if we work with businesses that are already trying to do it, we can make it easy. And then the other thing that we've actually done is we've had some success working with the green teams at the elementary school. So this would be an interesting way to enter, maybe talk about connecting with the school board. And in doing some textile drives. And I think what was missing and what would have been really cool and a kind of a cool way for us to enter the conversation is there's so many great topics to talk to kids about in education around waste, like how much it takes to make a pair of clothing, like what happens when we use it again. So I think it could have been a really fun way to kick things off and, you know, do a presentation perhaps for the kids. One of the schools that did a really had an amazing drive, they had a little competition, like who could collect the most amount of pounds of clothes. And so I think there's just I think if we're creative, it wouldn't take a lot of work because again, we can partner with like businesses like mine, and I'm sure there's lots of other businesses that would be interested. We have 4 reuse stores in Issaquah alone, and then you've got Ridwell, and there's plenty of other people doing this kind of stuff. We just have to kind of be that. I think if we can be the glue and then put our name on the top, and then have a table that says, "Hey, while you're here, did you know that this is what we do? And we'd love your support. And come to a meeting." And maybe I think for our long-term health, that's something we actually need to put a little more thought into. Is we can't do this for the next 50 years. These 12 people. Yeah. So, just a thought. Great.
Just cycle on some spot.
But are they big and are they hosted by us?
The city does. Yeah, we started, and you may not see the information as not a resident, although it should go out to businesses. So that's a good thing. We'll talk to Sam about. The city last year started partnering with the city of Sammamish to save on resources because we were doing the exact same events, and the Eastside Catholic facility is just a great one to work with. So we try to do them twice a year. So Sam can talk a little bit about those in December, but finding better connections to businesses would be great. And I might have to reach out to you.
Well, also maybe not having it necessarily hosted by the city, but making sure that we are a host of it somehow. I don't know. Maybe it doesn't matter. But it seems like I said, I didn't know you guys even existed.
Right. Yeah.
So whatever we can put our name on is going to be good. It seems like.
Like anything?
Yeah. Thank you.
And then social media.
Just briefly on this, if you haven't already brought this to Sam, can you make sure she's ready to talk about the topic that Jamie brought up?
Yes. Yes. Yes.
All right, Jonathan, I have you next.
So along the same lines of what Dixie was talking about, something the city could do is promote reduction of solid waste, non-biodegradable packaging, specifically plastics. A lot of the businesses in town produce a lot of plastic waste, and the city could have some outreach program to businesses and people about reducing the use of plastics. Plastics are not sustainable, and for sustainability, we need to figure out a way to reduce the use of plastics. And I don't see anything about solid waste as part of our sustainability. It seems to be pretty easy thing we could do as a city, is to approach our businesses, our restaurants, our grocery stores, gas stations, everyone that sells products. Maybe we don't legislate change, but we speak to each restaurant owner and ask them to inventory their use of plastics. I don't even want to go get takeout anymore out of our restaurants. It's sad to see how our plastic bags are coming back into common use in our stores. So I'd like to see the city somehow add that to their agenda for sustainability.
I would say PCC is a good role model.
A fantastic role. In fact, I went to get a carton of milk the other day at POC, and I was there for other things, but every single one of the milk cartons had a plastic 3-piece opening on it. And I left there and drove to PCC cartons that did not include the plastic container, the plastic cap. PCC's made that.
Thank you, good to know. Raj?
Thanks, Don. So yeah, I agree with what people have been saying. I think Dixie and John both have great ideas, and I just wanted to add to that a little bit, especially for schools. Yeah, the green teams are great. I know of multiple robotics teams who did their community outreach events where they actually had hard to recycle stuff being collected, like your laptops or your electronic waste, and then they collected all of that from different households or ran a recycling event in a school, collected all of it, and then disposed it off properly. So we can do something like that. And if you like at the time of sustainability fair, before the sustainability fair, I know it's usually advertised in the Issaquah Schools bulletin, but also you can just 2 months before the sustainability fair, you can advertise if any schools are interested in helping running an events for sustainability fair, or if you have any specific jobs, Stacey, you can think of. I think some of the schools, green teams, as well as these robotics teams and stuff, would be interested in picking it up for community outreach. And regarding the plastics which John was talking about, even Ridwell does some, school events. Like they will, if you reach out to them, they can do, a free recycling event of certain things for your school. Like I've seen the advertisement. So these can be arranged to, if there is interest, and if city or anything means we can do it as set individual resources as well. That's it.
Thank you, Raj.
Yeah.
Great suggestions. I will send those on to Sam and make sure she can touch on the ones that are in her work plan next year. And then we can talk more about maybe what isn't in the work plan and how we might see that through.
Yeah, that would be great.
Great. I think I'm handing it to David now.
Great. So next priority is city facilities and fleet decarbonization. So one of the things that we've heard from the development of the ICAP, from this board, from council, is that we as a city should be a leader, or should lead by example when we can, relating to decarbonization and addressing our greenhouse gas emissions. So this is one of our big priorities this year. Buildings and transportation continue to be the largest source of greenhouse gas emissions from city operations. And so that's really where we're digging into thinking about addressing our greenhouse gas emissions. Within this area, I'm kind of splitting it out into these two different tracks. The first is continuing to do our planning work and building a transmission line of new projects, right? So that's thinking about the design work, thinking about the plans and analyses around what different projects are going to have different impacts on our greenhouse gas emissions that we can prioritize for CIP, for our capital improvement plan, for our budgets, things like that. The other side is actually trying to move forward with projects. So many of these projects take a very long time to get in the ground, but we're excited that we have designs for some projects, we have funding for some projects, and we're really hoping and planning to get some of those projects completed in the next year. So some of those include things like EV charging stations at 3 different facilities, including this one, for our fleet transition, things like doing some HVAC replacement and trying to reduce the use of natural gas at some of our facilities, informed by our fuel transition assessment, which there was a written report in today's packet about some of that planning work. And then also doing our work to try and identify and move forward some of those renewable energy projects at city facilities. And so I mentioned before, we have been unsuccessful at some of our grants, but we do have some funding set aside to support some of those projects. And we're also trying to continue to build that pipeline of that transmission line of different renewable energy projects, solar, microgrids, and some other exciting ideas as well, so that when opportunities do arise, we seize them as best we can. So that's a brief summary of our facilities and fleet decarbonization efforts. Any questions there?
I was gonna make a comment about the report, so I'll just say it in this one since it seems to fit. It seemed like the report, there was a lot of things that said like, there's a lot of expensive things and won't go. There's huge costs to some of these transitions. Has the city in the meantime considered doing like offsets and carbon credits and things like that to offset the cost of the current carbon? Sorry, I'm failing words right now.
Yeah.
Yes. In the meantime, while we try and figure out where we're getting the funding for $5 million or so.
And that $5 million is low. I will admit also that does not, that was just equipment that didn't include electrical upgrades, which are needed. So just as a warning, I've been digging into some of that analysis over the last couple days. We do offset our electric use emissions. So you'll see that in the next, that was already incorporated in the previous greenhouse gas inventory, and that'll be seen in the next one where we purchase into a green power program, Green Direct from PSE. So that essentially connects our electric use with renewable energy use at PSE. So we do offset our electric use that way. We have not yet fully dived into thinking about offsetting our emissions from natural gas use in our facilities. I think we've looked into it on a much smaller scale for some city operations efforts, or for some city travel efforts. But I think we've had trouble identifying kind of the right offset opportunity that we thought was appropriate and was an accurate kind of one-for-one or connection to our emissions that we're doing. So, yeah. Okay. So the next item is community resilience. So this area of priority recognizes that the impacts of climate change are already here. They are being felt by our community. And so we are trying to continue to build our community's capacity to withstand those impacts. So work in this area looks like identifying and pursuing opportunities to improve resilience, climate resilience at city facilities. So this is an overlap with the previous slide, but again, thinking about things like microgrids and backup generators and those pieces of equipment so that if the power goes out or if there is a climate emergency, that we can continue city operations and also provide additional services to residents and community members who might need them.
Define microgrid or explain microgrids.
Sure, please. Yes, thank you for that. So the microgrids that we're looking at here are thinking about power systems, electric power systems for facilities that can operate even when the power goes out, the PSE power goes out in a region. So what that will generally look like would be solar or some sort of renewable energy generation connected to a battery system onto facilities. So that's the general idea of what we're looking at here. Microgrids are not cheap, but we are, again, pursuing grant opportunities that we can here and also identifying areas where we could further those in the city as well. Additionally, I'd mentioned that we're going to continue to coordinate with our emergency management team to continue our Resilience Hub project implementation. So this is something that I've mentioned a couple times with the board. We haven't brought to the board in too much depth yet, but this continues to build up sites across the city that can support community members before, during, and after climate emergencies. And that's co-managed between the sustainability team and emergency management. And then the final piece here is continuing to develop resources and tools to provide to community members, to engage community members so that folks feel supported and more prepared for the impacts of climate change. And so that's things like story maps, information on expected climate impacts, things like that as well. Yeah. Yes, sorry, questions?
Quick one. Just as we think about community resilience, climate change, there's two main impacts I think of that are relevant on like their HVAC systems are it getting hotter in summers and there being more wildfire smoke. And that as an opportunity, I haven't seen a lot of like communication around reminding people that heat pumps also do cooling, but that might be something you're already doing, but something to think about heading into summer season for heat pump campaigns.
Yep.
I think that gets incorporated into some
Air filtration.
One, not having to have windows open is the way the approach that.
Yeah. And that also goes into even thinking about building climate resilience for our own facilities, right? We have some facilities where, I'm thinking about our fleet shop where people are working, and it gets very hot in there. There's not as good air filtration and air circulation and things. So we're looking at ways that we can even within our own city facilities try and support the resilience using heat pump options and things like that. So, okay. Two others on this slide. So we're going to be working on our 2024 greenhouse gas inventory next year. So the year is almost up. And so we're going to be initiating data collection, coordination with our consultants on this, and updating greenhouse gas inventory communication and materials. So we're going to do this in as timely a manner as we can. Unfortunately, some of the community-wide data, especially, is not generally available until later in 2025 or later in the year after the year you're trying to assess. So we'll be gathering what data we can, and then also similar to our 2022 inventory, we're hoping to present roughly 1 year, a little over a year after the end of 2024. So that would look like winter 2026. The idea with this is that it will get to inform the next priority, which is informing the ICAP 2026 update. So a crucial piece of that update process is thinking about where are our greenhouse gas emissions at that point. So we want to make sure that as we go into that update process, again, we're trying to get as early data as we can to inform that update. We are kicking off that update next year, so we're going to be looking at community engagement in the spring. And then we're expecting environmental board engagement in the summer and fall of next year. And our hope is to get the ICAP updated and approved by June of 2026 so that it can really inform budgeting decisions at that point. So both of these kind of work hopefully as flawlessly or as seamlessly as possible into each other as the greenhouse gas inventory will inform that ICAP update process.
And 2026 is like January, February 2026 is December 2026. I was like,
yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Sorry, that's a good one. Winter of 25-26. Yes.
Just on the timing of this update, I saw on the agenda or on the work plan that we're going to be getting some of this information in January. Is that correct?
For the ICAP update, yeah, we have not even started the conversations yet with our consultant on the engagement process, but our hope is to bring to the board in January at least a preliminary kind of schedule, especially around the community engagement piece, which will happen primarily in the spring. And we still need to get our heads together exactly what does the ICAP update look like. Just early thinking, this is not a complete overhaul. Probably a bit more of a cleanup, refinement, improving metrics, connecting actions to the targets. That's at least initially what we're thinking, but we want to have more of that conversation with the board. So
that's what I was looking for. So we can talk about that in January.
Yeah.
Around that. It's good to all around that process. Okay, great.
So it seems like there's a lot of great ideas around community involvement. And I just wanted to run a couple more ideas by you. So I went to the city volunteer portion of the website where people go to find out ways to volunteer. And was thinking that under the city programs, potentially we could have a climate action category. And maybe we could even get a volunteer to help organize the volunteers. Because I know that organizing volunteers can take a lot of time. Or we could just send them in different directions of ways that we already know that they could be volunteering to help implement or spread the news about the climate action plan. And then another idea, and this is another place where maybe we could use some of those volunteers. Do we have a educational booth about ways to get involved with the ICAP at the farmers market?
No, we have brought programming to the farmers market a couple times, but that relies on David, myself, or our Civic Spark fellow being available. And we do have a listserv of volunteers that we reach out to help with those kind of events. I know you've helped at some of them. But yeah, we haven't done kind of just a general booth on ways to get engaged. I know our volunteer webpage, I think, is primarily focused on parks programs right now. It's been a while since I looked at it, but that's something we could make sure to add to. Yeah. Because I keep just a kind of list of folks that have expressed interest. So, to make it easier for folks to reach out to us, because we do need a lot of help at events and sustainability fairs. So you can think a little bit more about that.
Just some thoughts.
Yeah.
That maybe we could get volunteered. Would you guys have to be, like, I know, like, me personally, I always think, oh, we could do the farmer's market, I could help out with that. But then when it gets down to it, on the weekend in the summer, I usually don't, I've got other things going on.
Right.
So, but maybe there would be a volunteer.
Could coordinate
Like,
that.
we're all volunteering, right? So
Yeah.
maybe there would be a volunteer that would want to do that. There's amazing people out there.
Yeah, that's a great suggestion. Yeah.
Maybe they could just get all the materials from you guys and maybe we could even take turns, since we're pretty well versed here in environmental board. Maybe we could just do once or twice.
Great.
Thank you, Anne. Raj?
Here.
You hear me? Sorry.
Yes.
Okay. So Stacey, I just wanted to add, especially for sustainability fair, if you are looking for volunteers, ahead of time, if you reach out to me, I can help you find student volunteers or teams as well. Especially middle school, high schoolers, based on the timing, would be happy to help out and get volunteer hours.
Great. Thank you. Yes, we will be starting recruitment in January. Winley's going to be leading that. So we will definitely reach out to you and all board members.
Sure.
Great.
Do you have the date already set?
We do. April 26th. We're at the end of the month this year. It's a Saturday.
Is that day?
It is the 22nd is Earth Day, so we're the Saturday after. We've tried to avoid that in the past because Downtown Issaquah Association, the Hatchery, so many community partners, the zoo do events that day. But that happened to be the day that was available at Pickering Barn. So we kind of jumped on it, but hope to partner with all those other events that are happening.
Yeah, I was gonna say you should get that word out to them to ask them to send them to the sustainable.
Yeah. Yep. I did send an early alert to them just to let them know. So we'll try and coordinate. You'll be hearing lots more about this soon. All right. Move on. We are running short on time. So I think we just have a couple more things to highlight. So a few items we just wanted to note. You will not see these reflected in the budget because these are primarily staff time. The other areas David and I are prioritizing is looking at policies that could be used to fulfill a need where programs may not be able to help us make progress towards our targets. So we will be kind of evaluating which policies we want to pursue this year. As I believe I mentioned earlier, Sam's also looking at policies to pursue for waste, and I think we'll probably share some initial ideas with you all in December. And then, of course, always high priority is pursuing that grant funding. I think a lot of the grants we're most likely going to be looking at are first our own building improvements. So can we get those solar grants, energy efficiency, appliance replacements? That'll be a big priority, but we'll pursue grants to support our community efforts as well as those are available. And then a few items kind of on the flip side that you will see reflected in the budget that went to council, but are not projects that David and I necessarily lead, is we did put in some transportation planning grant matching funds this year. Our planning department applied for a grant around active transportation. If they're successful, some of those funds will come out of our budget. If that grant is not successful, we plan to work closely with our transportation team, both the planners and engineers, to identify other ways those funds could go towards transportation projects. And then we're also working closely with Dan on a tree giveaway program. One of the recommendations that came out of the Evans School research and presentation that you all saw in June, that probably won't be launched until fall 2025. That is a quick snapshot of the work David and I are planning to prioritize next year in terms of ICAP implementation. Wanted to see, we heard lots of great feedback, ideas throughout the presentation. Is there any other items that jump to your mind in terms of gaps or things you really expected to see us working on next year that weren't reflected in that presentation?
Super quick. One of the things as part of ICAP update that would be really interesting to talk about are the criteria that you're thinking about for evaluating actions. So we'd love to, I think that'd be a great topic that maybe was already in a conflict with the board's comments on.
Okay.
Anybody else? Anne, did you have anything? So.
I guess I was kind of looking something up.
Yeah.
So through the Climate Commitment Act, there's already a bunch of, on one of their websites, there's a bunch of ways that people can get rebates on things. It's already all set up. So what do you think about sharing that with our community?
Yeah, let me take a look at that because I know the HERE funding isn't yet available, the federal HERE funding, but I'll look. We've been trying to share incentives, for instance, the car rebates this summer, the PSE incentives that were available at an income level, and then Switches On is being used to promote. It's a multi-county initiative being proposed. Being used to promote a lot of the incentives.
The utility bill credit.
And the utility bill credit is the one I was referring to. But yeah, if there's other resources you come by that we haven't tracked down, please feel free to send those to us and we'll see if they're already in part of the promotion or other ways we can promote. That's great. Thanks.
Thank you. Nina?
Yeah, I don't know if there was youth comment or youth
Yeah, I think we're having
comments on the sustainability policy.
Great.
Ambassadors.
Yeah, I was actually going to ask, can you just give us your updates via writing, email, so we can have a chance for...
Yes, I have maybe 2 or 3 things maybe to mention verbally, but I have a long list of council updates, either that just happened or are coming. I will provide those in an email tonight.
Good.
Yeah, so the sustainability and policy that was proposed and that I mentioned last time they were on the school board agenda to present their official draft of OE17, and they reformed everything to fit the school district style, but essentially the purpose of it would be to have a standalone sustainability OE for the district, and so they're currently waiting to hear back regarding their first official read and to passed an OE need 2 official reads, so they're unsure of the timeline, but are waiting and hoping to get that approved sometime in the new year.
So fantastic.
Yeah.
Way to go on that.
Nice work. Anything to add, Ken?
No, sorry. Real quick updates. So December, we will hear from Sam, solid waste updates. Believe we're still planning to do a sustainable building and infrastructure policy update. That's an internal policy we're working on. So hear from our consultants, and then we'll be looking at the report and work plan for approval. We had the surprise visit from the mayor today. She is planning to come back in December. So if there are other questions that you all have, I can send, please send those to me. I'll share those with her in advance. And then we had one question about our December meeting. We had talked about possibly doing a little bit more of a social gathering at 6 to 6:30, maybe a potluck if folks would be interested in that. And then moving into our regular meeting, hopefully wrapping up around 8. That might be optimistic, but I want just to get a show of hands if folks would be available and interested to come early. I believe it's the 11th. It's the 11th. To come 6 to 6:30. I know, Dixie, that might be hard with
I never know.
store. Yeah, we can save you a plate of food. And if folks can come, if you'd want to do a little potluck. Sure. Show of hands, interest. Okay. Enough interest. Tentative. Okay. We'll plan on that. We'll send out more information ahead of time. There's a lot happening with council, including budget. I know there was some interest around budget. So just to share really quickly, at the first, when staff provided and the mayor provided the budget to council, sustainability really was highlighted a number of times as a priority. So far, fortunately, we've had little impact on our department. We did do a 12% reduction of the waste hauler administrative fee. That was equivalent about $120,000 a year that we requested from our ask. But as you heard from the mayor, other departments had pretty hard hits, had staff cuts. So we really feel fortunate. We're also very fortunate to have a lot of access to grant funds that can help with our staffing and our programs. So right now we're feeling we're in a good position for the next 2 years. There's still a number of deliberations and hard discussions council needs to have, but I'll send you all some updates on that schedule if interested. They are looking to approve the budget by early December. The last thing I did just want to mention verbally is while CCA survived, Initiative 2066 did pass. So there are some evaluations looking at what impact that will have on incentive programs for electrification. We've had some initial legal analysis. We're also looking to the guidance of the state, given that so much grant funding is out for electrification programs. At this time, we've not been told to pause any of those incentive programs, but we'll be working with legal team if that does happen and keep you all informed.
You've probably heard that there's a lawsuit against that.
We were just on a call yesterday wondering if it had been filed, if something had been filed.
Yes, I think so, and I sent that if you'd like.
Okay. Yeah, and the reason 2066 has some language around cities, utilities, and counties prohibiting, there's another term in there, or discouraging basically folks not using natural gas. So there's a question around, do incentive programs discourage folks from transitioning from natural gas? So many more conversations to have. But at this time, we're continuing with our programs as is until we are told otherwise.
All right. Thank you very much. And with that, I'll call the meeting adjourned.